In video 4, we introduced the idea that a single word can convey two kinds of meaning at the same time. We called those two kinds of meaning the denotative meaning and the connotative meaning. The denotative meaning is the thing or concept in the world that a word points to, and the connotative meaning conveys, more or less, the speaker's opinion of that thing. As an example, we considered different ways that I might refer to my car. I could use the term old jalopy, sweet ride, rust bucket, or just plain car. In the context, each of these words would have the same denotative meaning, in other words, my car, but each conveys a different connotative meaning. In general, connotations can be thought of on a scale of positive to negative, but of course each term has nuances particular to the language, culture, and situation. Another example would be the different ways you might refer to a child. Perhaps someone you babysit, as that kid, that brat, or that little angel. In this case, the three terms would all have the same denotative meaning, the child you are babysitting, but the three terms have different connotative meanings, as they all express different opinions of the child's personality. Let's think for a minute about using the term angel to refer to a child. If we think back to our car example, we'll note that the primary senses of the terms we used all indicate cars in various states. For example, the word jalopy by itself almost always denotes an old car. Similarly, in the babysitter example, the word kid and the word brat are usually used to refer to children. The first thing we think of when we hear the word angel, however, is more often a celestial being, not a human child. By using the word angel to refer to a child, does the speaker intend us to infer that the child is not quite human? If not, what does the speaker want us to infer, and how do we know? In order to understand what the speaker means when she refers to a child as an angel, the hearer needs to understand two things. The first is that the subject being referred to is a child, not an actual angel. The second thing the hearer needs to understand is which angelic trait the speaker means to attribute to the child. In our culture, angels are typically thought to have a number of traits. They are beautiful, radiant, and virtuous, often depicted as having wings, and in the Judeo-Christian tradition might be thought of as powerful and terrifying. When referring to a person as an angel, only a small subset of these attributes are usually in view. When applied to a child, an obedient and sweet disposition is usually being highlighted, traits associated with angelic virtue. The term angel can also be used to refer to adults. If the subject is a woman, beauty or kindness are usually the attributes in view. When applied to an adult male, kindness or helpfulness. How do we know that these are the traits being highlighted and not, for instance, having wings or being shiny? Angel is not the only term we use to designate and describe other people in this way. Quite frequently, animals, birds, and other creatures fill the same function. We can say someone is a fox, a tiger, a turkey, a sloth, a dog, a chicken, a shark, a leech, a pig, a worm, an ox, or any number of other things. When we use these terms to refer to people, we usually do not mean that they share all the features of a typical member of these species. For instance, if we say someone is a chicken, we are usually not seeking to convey that, in our opinion, that person is a poor flyer, pecks at gravel, clucks, or walks funny, but rather that they are timid or easily scared. If we say someone is a tiger, we usually do not mean that they are patient or cunning or have stripes, but rather that they are energetic and aggressive. How is it that we know which attribute is intended when we hear these terms? What if someone were referred to as a chinchilla or an aardvark or a tuna? What attribute would we think of then? In all likelihood, we probably wouldn't know if these terms were intended as compliments or insults. When we refer to other people with terms like angel or chicken, we're using the words metaphorically. We can also use names of food. We can say someone is a peach, an Oreo, or a ham. We use the names of people like Romeo, Matahari, and Judas. We can even say that someone is the cat's meow, the bee's knees, or the black sheep of the family. People can be penny wise but pound foolish, or a day late and $1 short. When we say that someone is the black sheep of the family, what is the denotation and the connotation of that term? As with the other metaphors we've considered to this point, the term denotes a person. The connotation, however, is not a specific character trait, but rather that the person being denoted is somehow different than the rest of the family. And we use metaphors for more than just people. What do expressions like a piece of cake, a horse of a different color, or pie in the sky communicate? How about pie in the sky? First, what kind of thing does this term denote? A person? Not usually. It is usually used to refer to a specific outcome, something hoped for, an idea. What does the term connote? In this case, it is meant to convey the unlikelihood that the outcome will ever be realized. It's a way of saying that I think what you're hoping for will never happen. Metaphors are part of a class of expressions often referred to as figures of speech. The figures of speech we've considered so far can denote a person, an object, or an idea, while they connote a particular quality that, in the speaker's opinion, characterizes the thing or person being denoted. In addition to metaphors, we use complex expressions like putting the cart before the horse, chasing your tail, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and flying by the seat of your pants. These expressions are a bit different to the ones we've considered so far, because we use them to denote activities and express our opinion of processes or outcomes instead of qualities or characteristics. In these cases, it is probably better to talk in terms of what these expressions imply rather than what they connote. For example, if I tell you you are chasing your tail, what am I implying about whatever activity you're involved with? Some figures of speech denote more specific states or activities. Expressions like pulling one's leg, letting the cat out of the bag, and the penny dropped fit into this category. For example, the penny dropped is about someone's thought processes and indicates that the person in question suddenly understands an important point. The expression, the rabbit died, is one of these, with a very specific implication only obliquely related to the death of rodents. We use quite a few expressions like this one to talk about a variety of topics. Quite often, these are topics that it may be dangerous or embarrassing to address directly. So using these expressions allows us to put a little distance between them and ourselves. The term for figures of speech used in this way is euphemism. Have you ever been on a committee where the collective input is creating a monster, or stumbled upon a situation that can only be the result of uncoordinated planning? At times like these, someone might observe that too many cooks spoil the broth, even if neither cooks nor broth are anywhere in evidence. Or perhaps you've run out of gas on your way to an important appointment, and one of your passengers helpfully observes that a stitch in time saves 9, even though needles and thread have nothing to do with your current predicament. Statements like these are part of a collection of sayings that we might hear, and perhaps even use, in a variety of situations over the course of our lives. They are called maxims or proverbs, and are often cited to drive home a point or shore up an argument. Using these expressions is a way of reminding our listeners of a truth we all agree on that can be applied to the current situation. Proverbs invoke the wisdom of the ages and invite listeners to consider how it might apply here and now. The extra effort it takes the listener to make the connection between the proverb and the current situation also makes the point being made more memorable. Sometimes we'll say things to remind people of an altogether different scenario than the one we are currently experiencing. These scenarios are usually related to stories that people who share our culture are likely to be familiar with. Expressions that do this, often quotes from books or movies, are called allusions. Like proverbs, allusions are invitations to consider the parallels between the current situation and the story I am bringing up. Often the point of alluding to a known story or event is to suggest that the motivations of its characters are similar to those of someone in the current context, or that the outcomes of our current situation will be similar to those of the story being alluded to. When we started investigating the role that inference plays in understanding language, we focused on how we infer the denotation of potentially ambiguous words. we saw the role that a shared interpretive context plays in inferring the correct meaning. We next observed how the use of different words to denote the same object or person allows us to simultaneously convey denotative and connotative meaning. We also saw how what is being denoted plays a role in influencing the connotation we infer from a given word. In this video, we've seen how using metaphors extends our options to add connotative meaning to a message, but correctly inferring what is meant by a metaphor requires some added steps on the part of those receiving the message. First, they must correctly infer what the metaphor is meant to denote. They must then recognize that the thing being denoted does not fit the category of the objects typically denoted by that word. They must also know what characteristics the metaphor being used usually conveys in the language and culture where the communication is taking place. Interpreting more complex idioms requires all of the gymnastics needed to interpret metaphors, with the additional understanding that it is the expression as a whole that conveys the meaning, not the individual words in the expression. For example, if I say, "You're pulling my leg," you need to know that neither the word pulling nor the word leg by themselves are meant to carry any meaning. Rather, their combination functions as a single unit. Like individual words, idioms need to be learned as units of the language. The use of figures of speech also encourages us to infer the reasons that they are being used. Euphemisms, for example, alert us to the emotional discomfort of the user and clue us into a perception of risk connected to stating things more plainly. The embarrassment or fear that euphemisms shield us from are almost always indications of cultural norms that should not be violated. The use of euphemisms or other figures of speech also provides clues to how people perceive their relationship to the person they are addressing. Inferring the meaning of proverbs and allusions involves all of the complexities of interpreting idioms, but also adds the complication of inferring which parallels the speaker sees between the current situation and the truth or the story being alluded to. To do this successfully, the hearer needs to be able to conceptualize two situations simultaneously, the current situation and the one being alluded to, and then figure out what parallels the speaker is drawing between the two. Once this is done, the hearer needs to infer the speaker's purpose for drawing the parallel. Is it to criticize? To persuade? To threaten? To encourage? Getting it right makes all the difference. When we attribute meaning to any message, we make use of every aspect of the interpretive context, and what we infer is not limited to what the words being used refer to. We also infer the speaker's opinion of those things, his emotional state, and the state of our relationship with him. Quite often, to get the point of a message, we need to infer that the speaker is thinking of another situation, and then infer how that situation is like the one we are currently in. Finally, we infer what the speaker is trying to accomplish with the message. As we move through the series, we'll see other ways that these inferences come into play. In the next video, number 8, we'll focus on ambiguity and explore some of its uses.